Ori and the Will of the Wisps is an action-adventure platforming Metroidvania created by Moon Studios, and is a direct sequel to Ori and the Blind Forest. And I mean direct, as in Will of the Wisps starts mere moments after the end cutscene. Ori and his ragtag family get the addition of a newborn owl. After a heartwarming aging montage, you join the owl, now known as Ku, on her maiden flight. An unexpected storm rolls in, causing Ku and Ori to be separated in a foreign land where spirits and the forest guardian tree have long since disappeared. From a general standpoint, there are a number of changes from the first game, many of which seem inspired from the Metroidvania Hollow Knight. The change to a melee combat system, unlockable interchangeable skills, replacing the make-your-own save point mechanic with a healing system where you convert energy into health, the switch-off experience levels into a currency system, and a more populous world with characters often found roaming the various locations on adventures separate to your own. But otherwise, it still carries the same soul as the first game. Platforming is still the main focus, and the new engine makes it flow much better, along with a few quality of life changes, like making it easier to go up walls and not needing to hold a button to climb, and the ability to fast travel without standing on a shrine to help save time crossing areas. Will of the Wisps also brings back a few older movement skills as well as a slew of new ones, like a grappling tether, sand burrowing, and a proper air dash, all of which is expertly introduced through progressive level design. Areas start by adding new gameplay elements. For instance, the desert area has these decaying sand platforms. You interact with them safely at first, with only solid ground beneath you, but then spikes are added, or your ability to jump is removed, or you have to chain jumps together quickly, or they become vertical wall jump platforms. After progressing through the different challenges, you are granted a new ability. In this case, the ability to burrow in the sand. This instantly changes the dynamic of the whole area. The walls of sand that had been scattered around the area now become traversable with an entirely different movement type to go along with it. And all the sand platforms that were giving you trouble to get over now take on the role of launch points to zip through and gain height or chain together to also reach new locations. All levels in some way mimic this design, making good multi-usage out of the layout and gameplay elements for both pre- and post abilities. And some of the levels follow the tradition of the first game and end with intense escape sequences that test your skill at rapid consecutive platforming. The overall changes to combat I mentioned were definitely a welcome improvement. The first game's combat consisted of close-range, auto-target shooting. In other words, tap button your enemy, which is not that interesting of a mechanic. The change to a melee combat style in Will of the Wisps immediately makes combat a healthier experience, as you now have to aim where you need to attack, and different directional inputs change the type of attack you do, adding some strategy to it, alongside a number of energy-consuming attack skills like shooting a bow, throwing a spear, or doing a large spirit blast, to add more options in how you approach different enemies. Unfortunately, while this is an improvement over the first game, combat is still a rather weak form of gameplay. Even without all the fancy skills, enemies are rarely a challenge, with easy-to-read attack patterns, and many are recycled as you progress through the different areas. The only exceptions to this would be the bosses, which are more dramatic set pieces, often weaving in an area's specific platforming gimmick along with normal combat, making the fights much more enjoyable. Both the combat and the platforming are going to be utilized as you explore around the map in a Metroidvania-like fashion, with areas being locked out until you have the correct abilities necessary to bypass the metaphoric locks in each one. A gripe I had with the first game was, despite being a Metroidvania, it had very little exploration. The map wasn't all that big, and every objective was clearly labeled, meaning you always knew where to go and how to get there. And, well, Will of the Wisps is still like that, but halfway through the game, things are changed up. You reunite with your feathered friend, and then a massive bullfrog more or less tells you that as the only spirit to have been in that land for ages, you can reunite the 5 wisps and save the forest. You get one for free, but are then tasked to find and recover the other 4. At this point, even though their locations are marked, you have to find out how to access those areas of the map, and they can be collected in any order you please. Aside from the desert wisp, which to be fair, the entire area can still be completed, just the act of collecting the wisp cannot due to story progression. This is a wonderful change, to be able to go where you want with complete freedom and see how the abilities you gain in one wisp area can be used in others, even though they aren't needed for the isolated challenges contained within. Alongside the main story progression are a number of side activities that can be completed at your leisure. These consist of quests given by the denizens of the forest and have you doing things like searching for specific items or finding a certain location. Some even take you to hidden loot. And there are also shrines, which involve more intense forms of the normal gameplay. One is a battle shrine, which consists of challenging multiple waves of enemies. Completing such rewards you with more skill slots. And the other is a time trial, where you race from one area of the map to another with a time limitation, and are rewarded with vast amounts of currency, which is used to purchase and upgrade skills, abilities, or buy maps from the map maker, provided you find his hidden hovel in each area. There are quite a few of each side activity, and they can be done alongside normal backtracking as you use your newly gained abilities to snuff out treasures you may have missed in previous areas. Even without the addition of all the gameplay, Will-O-The-Wisps could certainly succeed with just the art and animations. The graphical quality is significantly better than its predecessor, though that should be true of any game spaced enough apart. But here it shines not only in the big things, like the fluid movements of both characters and background foliage, or the general artistic impressiveness of the varied area biomes, but also in the smaller things, like the variances in Ori's jumps, or how he now has to toss key shards into doors, which is a nod to the fact that his Wisp friend from the first game isn't with him this time around. The music and sound design is also done well. Emotional, thematic music is placed in just the right spots, as well as the more upbeat Happy Times ones. The main theme from Ori and the Blind Forest is still remixed and spread all over much like before, which is either good or bad depending on your song preferences, but one of the neat things I noticed is that during those times I mentioned beforehand, where you acquire a new ability and the area opens up, well, right after hitting one of those points, the background music for that area becomes more upbeat, to reflect your newfound strength. It's those small things that really make this game so enjoyable. Now, I've been comparing Will-O-The-Wisps to the first game quite a bit in this video, which I feel is necessary as the comparison shows off some of the important changes and improvements that were made. But for those of you who don't care, or are unimpacted by those facts, I'll sum it up like so. If you like light Metroidvanias that have fantastic platforming and level design with impressive art and storytelling, then Will-O-The-Wisps is a game for you. But if you'd prefer a more expansive and exploratory map with a fluid combat system and an array of different enemies and bosses that challenge your every way forward, then there are better games for you to get your hands on. Personally, I think that both have their merits, but Will-O-The-Wisps definitely scratches a platforming itch more than a Metroidvania one, but it scratches it very, very well.